Hey everybody, how you doing, Sandra?
Oh, fabulous. It's nice and early here in Australia. So,
Okay.
haven't had the coffee yet, Andrew, but, hey,
Uh-oh.
ready to go.
I know you love your coffee,
I
so
do. I do.
so for
I'm a
those
coffee
coming in,
snob.
yep. So for those coming in, just want to remind you that today is Whimsical Towers Behind the Layers with Photoshop and Adobe Firefly with Sandra Dann. So here we are. And Sandra, did you want to introduce yourself and go over what we'll be going
A
over
little bit,
today?
a little bit about myself, I suppose, Andrew. But I'd call myself a digital artist or creative. And if looking at my work, it's a touch of storytelling, whimsical, and it's about creating for enjoyment. And with the Whimsical Towers, it was just about having some fun. And I now look at what I create and working with AI like Firefly, Photoshop. I can't live without, Andrew. That's my toolkit. And I love creating. And I think one of the things that I'll say as I go through this is that you create for yourself. It's not about pleasing others, it's about creating what's inside of you. And that's what's in the towers. I started with a tower. What am I going to do with it? And I had fun. I don't know about you, Andrew, but when you're in that creative zone, it's about the world just disappears and you're in there enjoying that moment. And for me, when I was doing these whimsical towers, that's what it was about. But, Andrew, you know me, colour. I love working with colour, background, adult educator. I did interior styling. Now I'm at the point in life where it's like, I just love being creative. So there you go, Andrew. That's a little bit about me.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I love the whole trance-like quality of creating, where you get, it becomes timeless. You become mesmerized, and you just
Yeah,
go into another deeper zone. It's also very good form of therapy.
it is. It's what I call get the monkey off the back and switch the thoughts off.
Right?
And then, but sometimes, Andrew, you walk away from an image, you go, what was I thinking when I created that? But you've
Especially
got,
when we look at older work, right? When you look at older work.
oh, it's shock horror. And
Yeah.
at that time, I was thinking, this is the best thing I've ever created. And you look back 5 years ago and you go, my goodness, where was I? What space was I in?
Yeah, right. I will, before we begin, I want to, let's see, a couple comments here. So Barbara's here. Howdy from New Mexico. Good to see you here, Barbara. And Rose is here from Christchurch, New Zealand. Looking forward to some creative ideas. Good to see you here. And before we jump in, just wanted to first give a shout out to StreamYard. StreamYard makes it all possible to do these live streams where I stream into Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube all at once. Thank you, StreamYard, for a great platform for this. And I also wanted to give a shout out to BenQ, which always accurate and consistent colors. There are the various monitors, which I should post on the event pages, but there's the BenQ monitors for graphic design, best monitors for Mac and Mac Pro, and also lately there is the BenQ PD 2730S. That is quite wonderful. And I believe I have a little thing here.
I use BenQ too, Andrew.
There it
They're a
is.
fabulous monitor.
Explore our professional designer monitor collection. Little quick video, just to
Ah,
I
I
think I
give it a
need to make that a little bit longer though, but yeah. Denise from QLD. Okay, well, Sandra has a lot to show us, so you want to switch over your view, and then I'll add it
yeah. I'll
to.
have a little bit of a chat, Andrew, before we dive in, and I
Okay.
start sharing of with the Whimsical Towers where I got the inspiration from, and I think it's really good to sort of think where do you get that inspiration? And for me, I was, as you do, going through and looking at different things, and I came across an art movement called Regionalism Art Movement. It was also known as American Art Movement, 1920s around about there. I'm not good on dates, but what I loved was the clean lines and the colour And I thought, this is where I'm going to play, because one of the things for me is I like to keep challenging myself, and I mix myself up with what I'm creating. My colours are very similar, that's my style, but it's like, let's experiment and let's see what I can create.
Nice.
So this is one of the things that I did when I looked at all these images, and I thought, oh, I quite like that. I'm very much a minimalist in probably my imagery. I don't like a lot of clutter. And that's just, it suits my style. But I think, you know, it's like similar, Andrew, you work on a style, but you evolve and you keep changing and coming back to different things. So
Sure.
with the Whimsical Towers, I had to do some workarounds, because how I would normally start with a composite was that I had to think outside the box. And Andrew, I don't know about you, but sometimes when you're working within Photoshop, one way doesn't work. So you've got to do a workaround, and you've got to think, well, what is it that I can do to achieve my vision? And this was one of the, you know, images. I did a set of 4. I'm going to cover 2 and just break down the layers, give
Right.
you my thought process. And then what I'm going to do is get you to a point where I go, this is where it tested me. I had to think outside the box. So that was just a little bit of a, you know, a preamble on that, Andrew.
So yeah, do you
So
want to
what we'll
switch,
do, we'll
switch
dive
over to
in.
Photoshop?
Yep, we're going to go straight over to Photoshop.
There we are.
So you should be seeing that.
Yep.
And so this was my first one that I created, and I had fun with it. And it's that very much what I call that illustrative look, muted colors, very simplistic. But I look at it and I think, oh, that pleases my eye. And that's what I was talking about, creating for yourself, not necessarily creating for others or competition constantly. It's about creating for yourself, and then you find your style. But I'm going to come over to here, and this is what I started with. And so when you look at it, you go, my goodness, did she start with that? How did she come up with what she came up with? So normally when I create a composite where I've got an element, say the tower, I would work on the background, get the background first, then put the tower in. But I couldn't find a background that would work. So I'll come back to this. If you look at the tower, to me, it didn't need a lot of busyness behind it. It just needed simplistic sort of composition, if I can put it that way. And so I thought, well, okay, I'm going to think outside the box here. I'm going to start with a texture, and this is where I'll break down the layers. So I'll do a sort of strip it right back. So my desktop may look different to how you work within Photoshop. I like everything on the right-hand side for me. I'm right-handed, and so I just set it up for the way that it works for me.
I do that
But,
as well, yeah.
yeah, I sort of just, you know, and I have a gaming mouse. To me, I work on the gaming mouse, and for that works, you know, particularly in the kind of work that I do, the gaming mouse is a far better mouse than what I call an office mouse.
Sure.
And so I've started with the base texture, and I go, yes, I like the muted colors. This is then when I started to put another texture, and I'm going to drop the blend mode and the opacity, and that's the actual texture. So some people would look at it and go, my goodness, why did you choose that? But once you start playing with the blend mode and the opacity, you get what I call that depth of texture coming through that's subtle. I've duplicated the layer because I thought, okay, now I stop and I look and I think, okay, so in my mind, I'm picturing the tower. What would be good behind the tower? I know I'll put a sky in, and this is one of my sky textures that's available in my shop. I have a lot of digital products that I sell. And so if I look at this, it's got the clouds. Now I tried to blend it. I tried to sort of extend it a little bit. I used a gradient, but it didn't work. And I went, okay, all right, let's just put the tower in. Voila, there it is. And I thought, okay, what am I going to do with this? So this is where you do the workaround. So I thought, oh, okay, I'm going to see what I can get in the foreground, and I'll turn that layer on. And this is what came up. Now, I'll do a disclaimer, Andrew, I know you would find the same, that when you use generative fill, you may get first go a fantastic, area there that you'd think, oh, I can work with that. Others, it might be, well, let's go back to the drawing board. But interesting enough, with this layer, I actually got this first go. And what I'm going to do is click on there in the contextual toolbar down the bottom of the photo, and I've put in Wheatfield soft muted colors. So it's what I call a simple prompt, but I was very specific that said soft muted colors, because when I look at the tower, it is muted in its tones. It's not vibrant, and it brings me back to that inspiration of that art movement. Now I thought, okay, I can work with this, and I'm going to show you how I did that, which is generally a bit different to what I normally would do. So let's come over to here. And this is actually what I did, was that I tried this. This is the workaround. I got object selection. I selected that area. And then I did a generative fill. But I didn't get what I wanted, because I'm jumping back. I found doing it this way actually worked around the tower, not across the whole image, which is a little bit different from when you're doing composite imagery. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come right down here, and I'm going to drag the tower over and place it in my textual background. I'll get the move tool, and I'll just position it. So this is where you play in position. It reminds me of that fairy story, Rapunzel, I think, wasn't it? With the long hair, she's standing up in the tower. But what I'm going to do now is get the object selection tool. And I discovered this, or maybe other people know about it, but I discovered it. I dragged that across, and Photoshop selections, absolutely fantastic since I first started with them now. It's selected around the tower. And I went, oh, that's interesting. Then I went into generative fill. Then I went in, well, what's my prompt? What do I want? This is where the imagination kicks in. Does it go in a vineyard? Does it go in a wheat field? Do I want rolling hills? Do I want flowers? So let's just put in there wheat field. Again, soft. Because what I don't want is a photorealistic foreground, because it doesn't match with the tower. So I'll go soft muted colors, clacking on the keyboard. You could do a little bit more in your prompts, but I'm just going to keep it simple. And this is like Christmas. It's you never know what it's going to come out with. So I'll go, okay, let's see what I come up with. And it's thinking. This is why I get excited, because you never know what you're going to get. Now I look at that and I go, well, that could work if I did a little bit of masking into the wheat. Let's have a look at this. Someone might look at that and go, yeah, I quite like that. That's, totally up to you. Let's click on the next one. And now I look at that. And for me, tonally, that works. And I can play with that. So that's actually how I got that foreground in here. Now, I looked at that and I went, yep, that's exactly what I could work with for several reasons. Simple. It gave a leading line like that path or the concrete in front of the tower. It also has the soft muted colors. Now, some people would look at that and go, but that's not real. So what I say when I'm creating my work, it's like, I'm not looking for reality. I'm looking for something that could be surreal, whimsy, or pleases the eye. And so this is where you start playing with it. So that's how I created that foreground. It just looks like it was bought there, Andrew. Just put it in, it looks fantastic. Well, I think so anyway. So then what we do is I look at the image. Do I want to have it like this, or what else can I put in? Now, my style is like if I put too many things in, it gets too busy, too cluttered. So I put trees in that were, you know, from my creative stash that I've collected over the years. And then to me, I look at it and I think there's an imbalance. We've got a lot of weight, what I call weight, on the right-hand side with the trees. We've got a strong figure in the middle of the tower. What does it need over on that left-hand side? And there's a little gem I put in, a little guy from the creative stash, and I've just placed him there. Now, I tend to use neural filters to blend some of my elements in, so I'll show you that later in the stack. I felt it was a bit bright. I did a hue and saturation to tone him down. Then I did a stamp visible. Now I look at it and I think, where's the weight or the balance for my eye? And so I've got balance on left and right. I've got the strong figure in the middle, but I want the viewer to drift their eye up and look up further, like start at the door, look at the windows and go, oh, I wonder what's up there on top of the tower. And so I used Firefly, as you do, go in, generative fill, and I did this little flag. Well, it's not little, it's quite big actually. But I looked at it and I went, oh, I like it, but it's too big. What can I do? This was the workaround. I actually selected the flag, copied it and put it over onto another layer, transparent layer, made it smaller using a transform, and then I came in to the image. I got rid of it, removal tool, fantastic. Then I placed that other flag that I worked on in the top, and now it works. To my eye, it just gives that lift to go and look up the image. So I'm looking at it now and I'm thinking, it's got all the elements that I want. I don't want anything else. Someone else might say, oh, well, I'll put a bird in or whatever. It's your choice. I did some what I call texture brushes on this to give it that very impressionistic paintbrush stroke, very subtle. If I have a look at that layer, it's on 64% on the opacity, so it's dialed it down. What I've done is one of my go-tos. I've done a photo filter. And so I will often use a photo filter and I'll use cyan. So I'll turn that layer on and I'll just double click on the properties and you can see that blue. And for me, that works because it just gives it that subtle blue tone coming through. And there it is. There's my first tower. So there it is, Andrew, just coming in and just going through those layers. So if anyone's got any questions, but I thought it was just good to go through that workflow. Okay, Andrew, I can't hear you. Yep.
Any questions, comments?
What were you thinking, Andrew? What were you looking at and going, my goodness, what is she on?
No, I just like the whole kind of feel of it,
Yeah, it's that soft muted colours, and it was the workarounds that I worked on to try and get it, because I found that when I tried to work on a foreground, just a big foreground, it just didn't work for me. And then I had to look at, well, that flag, I want a flag, but you know yourself, when you select that area, it takes in that whole area, but that flag was too big.
Right.
I had to make it smaller and do that.
Earthy colors too, earthy colors.
Yeah, that's sort of with this series. And I spoke about doing 4. And the reason that I do 4 or 3 sometimes is that basically it gives you consistency in style. And you have like a consistent element like the tower, but you've got to work up and get your imagination working on different foregrounds, different colors working in. So it gives you that consistency sometimes. And some images I work one of, some I work 3, 4 in that series.
Right. Okay.
So what I'm going to
jump back into Photoshop?
I will. So this one here, this did take a little bit of a workaround. And this is where I come back to the consistency, that I'll start from there and I'll work all the way up. There's the same background, same textures, same sky. So this is where the consistency comes in. So let's have a look at what I did. I went, okay, what am I going to do here? I don't know what I'm going to put in there. And this is what you struggle as a creative, isn't it, Andrew, where you go, what am I going to do? You know, I feel creative, but I don't know. So then I did this background. I came up with the same technique, selected the foreground, went to generative, and then I did this with it. I did, let's come right back to the beginning, rolling hills with small trees on the horizon, soft muted colors. And that's what I actually did with that. And then I thought, okay, well, let's see what it's going to come up with. And I thought, I don't know. And it came up with about 4 or 5, but I quite liked this one. So I kept with it. I did the tower, a different tower. And so now it's sitting there and I think, oh, yeah, okay, that can work. But I'm not happy with the foreground. Okay, I'll come back to that. And this is my thought process as I'm talking to myself, as I'm creating. So I did a hue and saturation just to dial down that opacity. Then I thought, okay, I'll do a stamp visible. Then I did another generative fill with Firefly. Now I came up with several, and I'll just sort of get rid of these. This is what it came up with, just different ones. And I'm just doing a happy clicker there and getting different, seeing what I can get. And this is where you can experiment working with it. So we'll let the generative fill do its little thing. And I came up with this, but what I'm going to do is disable the mask. And I looked at it and I thought, I like the green in that just under the trees. I definitely don't like that, what I call that dark, road-like look there. So what I came up with was something else. And I did a blank layer and I painted all around over that. And so what I did, I used a brush. I sampled by holding down the Alt key. I sampled a green within this area here, and I brushed across that at 100% opacity, so to block it out. And then I went, okay, I've got my base ready. Let's go back into generative fill. And I came up with this. So to me, it looks multi-layered. I've got the trees. I've got that middle, like mid-ground, where it's got some grass, soft tones, and then the wheat. Now, some people may look at that and think, no, that doesn't look real. That doesn't work for me. But again, it was because of that inspiration with that regionalism art movement. I've kept it there, and I thought, yep, I'm going to work on this and see what I can do with it. So stamp visible. Then this is where I'll play with some plugins, and I've gone into Nik Analog, and I use Nik in a combination with several plugins that gives me what I call that arty look. And I'll come in. Now you can see I've played with a little bit of a filter and an effect. I had an inspiration. I thought, let me put some clouds on top of the tower. And I sat and looked at it and I thought, I'm not sure on this. Okay, come back to the drawing board. I did a little bit more tweaking here with color balance and a few other things to get tonal range. I added a photo filter, cyan, which gives it that blue. The cloud's still there. It's still making an appearance. And then I went, it just isn't working for me. So I did, took it out. And I think that's the beauty of it. You have an idea, you put it in, you try it, but later in your workflow, you might go, it doesn't work. It was a great idea, but, you don't have to stick with it. So I got rid of it. Now, the next layer, one of the things that I learned when I was into serious competition, international competition, was sometimes to put a little gem in. So you make the judges look around your image and say, oh, hold on a minute, there's something little, a little gem. And I did. I put the sheep in. And there it is, just sitting there. It's like what I call fine Wally. And there's the little sheep there. And so, as I'm talking to you, I'm realizing that, there's an emotional investment in these images that you create, and it's like they're real. You talk to them. Well, I do, Andrew. I don't know about you, but anyway, but it's part of the creative process. Then I've come in and I've put some clouds, and I used a Photoshop cloud brush. Then what I've done is I felt up here in this area, just up at the top, it was too patterned. It just distracted my eye. So what I've done is I've painted across the top of the sky. I've taken the texture. So to me now, tonally, it works. And when I painted that, I did opacity roughly around about an 80%. So, for example, I just get a brush. I'll hold down the Alt or Option key if you're on a Mac. I might sample a color. Now I'm going to go for a dark color so you can actually see, and I can see that's the color there. Now I might change the opacity up a bit high so you can see. So this is what I call my disguise tricks. So I'll just paint across an area to blend something in. It's a what I call a down and dirty trick, but it can work. And that's what I've done with this top part of the sky. Okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to put a texture in just to give it that real grungy, painterly look, old feel to it. Now, let's take the blend mode off and I'll go normal, and then I'll actually change that to 100%. And that's a texture. That's one of the textures that's in the shop, and it's got different colored tonal range, the blue to the yellow. And I look at that going, it just gives me a subtle textured look in this image, but without being dominant. And, it's again, it's a different technique that I use. And then I went into vibrance. And so I just added a little bit of a vibrant lift within there. And so this was the second in the series of it. And so I started to play, and you can see the consistency with that. And so coming back, Andrew, is that I just broke down the layers and I looked at it and I thought, this is how I went through it.
I was going to say, you don't need to click on the view of the room, because then everyone sees that.
My apologies there. You don't want to see all that there. Good grief. I was getting so carried away in that image there, Andrew. I was like in the zone.
Yes, stay in Photoshop.
Yeah, stay in Photoshop. So is there any questions coming through?
No, I think people are just taking it in.
Okay. So what
kind of like the discussions we used to have, and no one would ask any questions.
I know. I was thinking, is anyone out there? Like, hello? It's just as Andrew and I, we both, do sessions, and you get there and you wonder and you think, is anyone out there? Come and talk to me. But I'm going to start now with looking at another image, and I'm going to start from the actual base of working with an image. Now, this was a little bit different, so I'm just going to close this down. And I did post this up and I'll bring this in. You'll understand where I don't look at things real. So here's another tower, and I'll tell you that story. It's to do with the trees. But again, let's come down and have a look. This time I started different. And this is what I started with. And I generated with Firefly. The prompts were pear tree orchard in soft muted colours. And this is what it came up with. And I went, oh, I can work with this. So I've done expand, the width. I've done a stamp visible. I've done a hue and saturation to dial it down. Then I put a tower in. Now I did struggle with the perspective of the tower. It's like, do I make it smaller? Do I make it bigger? No idea. So I played. I did a clipping mask with a hue and saturation just to tone down the tower. So when I'm going through my workflow, I like to sort of work in chunks. And when I first started, it would be I'd get to the end and I think, oh, I should have put this in. I should have done that. So by working in small chunks, elements, working with the tower to get it tonally right, then I don't have to do some, patch up work towards the end if my vision changes. I've done the generative expand. Oh my goodness, Andrew, back in the day when this Photoshop didn't have this, this is a lifesaver, generative fill, generative expand, all the tools that you can use now. So I'm just going to reset that and pin it so you can actually see. And we'll come down here, put it down there. Now, what do? I know I'm going to put in a cat, a hidden gem. I'll turn it off. There he is, little Felix the cat, and he's just sitting there hiding. Then this is where you can't see it very much, but actually what I did was I put a shadow under the cat. Now, for me, I don't like shadows in my work. Even though you can see shadows with the trees, that was generated, but generally I don't put shadows in. It's a standard joke with some of the, the followers, and they'll go, oh, I see a shadow. And so it's a little bit of a laugh. So I did a contact shadow. Here comes the flag again. Just put that in. Stamp visible. Now, another workaround. I'll turn this layer on. And I just went, I'm not happy with the tones. So I was naughty. I didn't name what I did. So when I turn that on, I go, well, what did I do? Who cares? It got the result that I wanted. Then I'll come in, stamp visible layer. I've gone into Nick Viesa, and this gives me an adjustment on the tonal range. Very subtle, but sometimes it can work, particularly with AI imagery, where you can just sort of like balance the colors and tones out. Then stamp visible with a little bit of texture brushing on. That gives me that impressionistic. And it's a technique that I use with an old plugin that's not available anymore, and it's called Topaz Studio. And so it softens the colors, and this is what I'm after. I use one of my color tints just to shift the tonal balance. Stamp visible layer, I've done a levels. Now the levels, I really lifted that, and so it's given some brightness in there. This one, I had lots of stamp visibles in there. I did a stamp visible. Now this is where I struggled back with, I put a shadow for the building on a blank layer. It's probably not perfect as a shadow, but I was quite happy that I looked at the image and I thought this needs a shadow. I need to work on my shadows, but that's okay. It's about having fun. Then I added a vibrance layer, very subtle. Then I did a grey layer. Now, whenever I'm doing dodging or burning or what I call sculpt in light, I actually use a grey layer, and it's non-destructive. So to get a grey layer, you'll go just straight up to layer, new layer. And this is where you'll change the blend mode to soft light. And you'll go fill with soft light neutral, 50% grey. It's like when you're working in photography, you know, if you couldn't get your focus, you try to get a focus on a grey, and then you click in there and that will give you a grey layer. So then I'll turn this layer on, and what I've done is just dabbed light all the way through. So my style on these series was what I call very arty, in just how I sculpted light and did a few other things with the tonal range. There's another photo filter. Let's have a look. What have I done? I've done that cyan color. But let's have a look now at the photo filter, and I can see that I've masked off some of that cyan in some areas. Stamp visible because I thought I was done. Let's turn this layer on. This, I think, is the workaround. I felt that the tower was just sitting there. It wasn't doing anything. And I thought, why not? Let's select the tower and size it up using the transform tool. And now I've made it dominant. It's the centerpiece. Now, when I put this up into one of my social medias, some person wrote, the trees look a bit big. And my response is, I'm not looking for reality. I'm looking for surrealism, something different, something quirky. But, you know, someone may look at that and go, yeah, that sits there. But, you know, hey, push the boundaries. Again, I've done a texture. There's that texture that I like using in my imagery. There's the texture there. And it's a nice finishing touch to fit in your images. And there's my final layer. Now, I'll turn that off and on. I tidied up some of the branches. And so this is where I went in and I just went, yep, I'm finished with it. So there you go, Andrew. This is where I've gone in and said, this is the series in there. So just muted there, Andrew. And for me, what I'm doing as I'm walking through that is I'm describing my thought process. And you can see in here it was real color that I was really concentrating on, but with a dominant. So, and there's my Whimsical Towers.
Yeah, nice.
I did. But that pear tree, I had fun with that one, putting a shadow. You know, I hate shadows. Andrew, are you a shadow person?
Yeah, I jump back and forth, you know, when it's appropriate. But yeah, I mean, I learned some little tricks. I mean, I like, remember, like you would use a drop shadow kind of adjustment layer, and then you would right click and make it its own layer, and then you can add a layer mask to it. And that was a helpful way of kind of creating shadows where you had more control.
Yeah.
But I remember that years ago when I learned that was kind of fun to be able to dissect it from the original kind of cutout shape. It could make it its own layer. It's nice.
Yeah, and I think for me, one of the things that I've learned is that I look more for the light, but not so much for the shadow. And I know that some people will go, but shadows are part of life when you're seeing. But my eye looks more for the light. How can I bounce the light around in an image? How can I get the viewer to look from there to light, to there to light, to there to light? Where someone will go, well, there's not a shadow, particularly on the cat, there's no grounding. It looks like it floats. And I get that, I understand that. And in some of the images, what I would do instead of putting a shadow was I'd use a Photoshop brush, a grass brush, and I'd mask the grass in if there was grass underneath.
Nice.
Yeah.
I like that
So
look.
it's one of my disguise works in there. So I've got one more. We can do another one, Andrew.
Sure.
Let's
Jump
close
into
down.
Photoshop. Yep.
Yeah, we'll come in. And let's have a look at the vineyard. So same thing, background's the same. It's just the foreground that's a little bit different. So let's strip those layers back down. I found this quite cathartic, actually, working with these images. It made me think a little bit differently. So let's start. There's my tower.
Well, I have a question.
Good.
That's right. I know we need more questions, people.
Yeah.
But so when you're creating, this image and this style, and it has this kind of somewhat illustration, painterly look, what is the text prompt that you might put in to generate the tower to give it that effect? Like, I think if you were to just say, tower soft light, you might get like a stock photo type of look.
Yeah.
What is it? Yeah.
When I'll go into Firefly and I'll generate that element separate. So looking at the prompt, I might go a whimsical tower. I'm just going back to how I created it. A whimsical tower with soft muted colors and a textured look. And then I go into Firefly and I might choose, how you've got your what I call different presets or styles, where you might go illustrative, and I'll look at that. I don't go, my first choice is never photorealistic, because my style's not photorealistic in particularly this. So I'll put those words in as the prompt, but then what I'll do is I'll choose the preset of the style, illustrative. And then I might come in and try some of the other different presets and styles, or what I call art movement styles. So I'll come in. So all I'm getting is the bones of the tower, but then I'll come in and choose a different style, art style, and I might sort of delete them at the bottom. With Firefly, you can delete the prompts that you put, not the prompts, the presets, I call them, and I get rid of them. And then I start looking at it and thinking, yes, this is the colors. But the key for me is that when I'm creating something like this is soft muted colors, or rich soft muted colors in the style of the old masters. So sometimes I will draw on paintings or art movements. So, if you might want something that's in a Van Gogh colours, a bit more vibrant, I would put there in the style of Van Gogh. And you've got to play a little bit. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And then let's say I've got this tower. What I can do is then download it, open it in Photoshop, and then what I'll do is I'll apply a texture to it, so it gives that texture. So if you see in here, it's got a very textured look to it. And that's actually what I've done, because when it was generated in Firefly, it's what I call flat, a very flat illustration style. So I've put a texture in. So one of the things that I'll do is I'll prep my elements before I put them into an image, so I get that look, because otherwise, if I'm trying to do it when I'm in the workflow of Photoshop, I just don't get the look that I'm after. But that's generally what I'll do. It's the prompt, soft muted colors, or rich muted colors, or rich vibrant colors. It depends on your eye, what you want for your color palette. And that's how I do it. Did that help on that one, Andrew?
Yeah, that's good.
So stamp visible, same technique, selected. And this is where I struggled with what I was going to put in that foreground. And I did a vineyard. And I went, oh, I like the leading lines. That really draws the viewer's eye. And I'm not generally thinking that draws the viewer's eye in. I'm explaining it in a teaching format. But I'll look at that and I go, yep, it's got the leading lines in. But what I don't like is the shadows in the foreground. So wait, there's more. So I do a stamp visible layer. Now, do I need birds? Do I need something? Do I want them in the sky? No. So in my technical term, I whacked in a bird, a crow. I've put him there. I've done another one in the distance to give the perspective, the leading line to come in, drawing it in. Made it smaller because the further an element is away, the smaller it gets. And I've also flipped that bird so that the two birds are facing in. Stamp visible. Now, this is where I am definitely not happy with that shadowed foreground. So I've gone in and chosen generative fill, selected this area with the quick selection tool. And so then I've come in and then I've gone, yep, that's got rid of the shadows. Don't like the shadows there, but again, that's just me. Then I'll go stamp visible layer. I felt the tower was a little bit too strong in the tones. So I've selected the tower, and I like to use the object selection tool a lot. So I've used the object selection. I've actually selected the tower. Then I've gone into Nick Analog and chosen a filter in there. And this just softened it a little bit. I did an invert on there as well. So I've softened that background, if you look. Stamp visible with, let's come back there. I've done that Topaz Studio, and I'll turn that layer off and on, and it softens not only the texture, but it softens the colors. Photo filter, there's my lovely cyan photo filter. I've done another texture layer. I've gone right to the bottom stack, selected it, copied it, and put it up there again. So it gives a little bit more depth in the texture, because what happened when I went into Nick Analog, it sort of softened it, but then I felt it was too soft. So I had to counteract it. Stamp visible layer, hue and saturation. Then I've done the flag. There's that flag. I'm loving that flag. Hue and saturation. Another stamp visible. I was really on a stamp visible mind trip on this one. And then I've done that texture, my favorite texture that I go, it just gives me. And those textures are the crackled textures that are available in my shop in there. So there's my series of the Whimsical Towers, Andrew, where I've just gone in and said, let's play and let's see what I can create. So there they are, Andrew, those 4 towers.
Nice. Very nice.
So anyone's got any thoughts? I'd love to hear something and see, if anyone's, even got a thought, comment. That would be really great. Or is it quiet out there, Andrew?
It's quiet.
It's quiet.
Well,
Maybe
I thought it was a very nice series, and it really takes you into kind of a real world or look. And I like the earthy colors, so
Yep.
It's nice that they all kind of maintain a cohesive series together. So
Yeah. And if I can make a suggestion, if you're starting out in the composite journey or digital artistry, it's really good practice to work on a series, because then while you're creating one and then you move on to the next, you're still in that groove. And so then you're going, okay, I'm going to have to use this tool again. And so it becomes like a rote learning in there, that you start going, yeah, well, I'm going to use the transform. Now I'm going to use this. Now I'm going to do that. But I found that consistency of the 4 images really helped with my color grading. And, if you sort of listen to when I was explaining, color's really important. It's just about my eye. But some people will go, I want vibrant. I want, out there. And that's fine too.
sure.
Because we all don't look through the same lens.
Yeah, different styles.
Yeah. You know, if we were all the same, how boring would it be, Andrew?
Right. No variety. We need
No variety, you know. That's how I view the world. But anyway, that's in there. So
great. Yeah, so
but
very
no,
nice. Very nice. So thanks again, Sandra, and let everyone know where they can find you online. So first, Sandra's website at sandradImagery.com,
yep.
and then on Facebook, Sandra D Imagery. She's keeping it together. That same
That's my signature
name.
piece
That's right.
there always.
I kind of wish I had done that years ago. Now I've kind of got slightly different ones,
Yeah, it was just, well, here's a secret. My middle name is Lee. My mother named me Sandra Lee. And so I've thought, oh, Sandra D.
Yeah, it's got a nice sound.
Yep, you know.
And so you can also find Sandra D Imagery on YouTube. So youtube.com at Sandra D Imagery. And then, as usual, I will post the link to the recording in the different groups and on social, such as Facebook. So consider subscribing for more Photoshop and Lightroom or Adobe Express and AI art, digital art, focused live streams and tutorials on my YouTube at youtube.com at Drew Cav. That's youtube.com at Drew Cav. And if you just go to YouTube, you can just do a search for Drew Cav on YouTube. You can follow me on Blue Sky. That one is bsky.app.profile. Drew Cav. So, yeah, just you could do a search for Drew Cav on Blue Sky. Yep. And then on Facebook, it's my full name, Andrew.Kavanagh. And that one I've had, since, I don't know, 2008, 12, I don't know. Yep, must be like 2000. And when did you join Facebook, would you say?
Oh gosh,
might be like 2007, 2008. So
yeah, I can't remember. I'd have to have a look. I mean, that just seems so eons ago, and you do that. But Andrea, I just want to say, look, thank you for all your work and allowing other creatives coming in. And I think it's fantastic because I say creatives. It doesn't matter whether you use AI photography or whatever. It's about you being creative. And I think, Andrew, what you do, I appreciate you letting me come in and just talk about my towers. And so I think it's a fantastic opportunity.
Excellent. And speaking of which, AI Art and Digital Art group on Facebook. Come join, facebook.com/groups, AI Art Digital Art. And I have two of them, but I will just show one. Do consider joining the Photoshop and Lightroom group, facebook.com/groups. The Photoshop and Lightroom group. I believe this is a larger one of 390,000. The other one's I think 166,000. Yep. I wish you could merge. I wish Facebook could say, give us the ability to merge two groups.
Yep. Do you ever get any sleep with all these groups, Andrew?
Oh, I do have other admins. Thank you very much. And there's also, admin assist now.
Yes.
Which is kind of hit or miss, like the admin assist tools. Some of them can be very helpful. But I'm a little weary of the bots. Like I think they're going to start pushing these, AI bots more. And I don't know if I trust them to monitor the groups. So, certain things are good at for like announcements and, declining posts with certain keywords, but other things, don't give the bots too much power on Facebook,
No, it still has to have a human element.
That's right.
It's like anything. You still have to put the human element into it. So
that's right.
But no, thanks for having me. And I wish everyone a creative weekend. And don't forget to play and experiment.
That's right. Have fun, be creative, and keep your eye on the top of the groups and on my social pages for the link to the recording to watch this, and feel free to share that with your friends. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.